Hi, I'm Linn Sitler with the Memphis and Shelby County Film and Television Commission. I'm here with Bob Raines, the Executive Director of the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, and we're coming to you from the Legislative Library at the Capitol in Nashville. Bob, Memphis and Shelby County have so many questions, I imagine people across the state do too, about not only the current status of the traditional incentive, but the status of this brand new franchise and excise tax credit incentive that you and your advisors have been working on for a long time.
And Lynn, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for the conversation. Yes, the state of Tennessee now possesses two incentive programs. One is a 25% grant rebate. The grant rebate is basically a cash rebate on all labor expenses and non-payroll expenses that are made here in the state of Tennessee. That program has been historically really targeted towards productions that are independent productions, productions that have significant Tennessee connections with them. And it's been a primary tool in our toolbox for recruiting productions here to the state of Tennessee.
We did well with Sun Records, didn't we? We used that grant fund for Sun Records and Bluff City Law, and then some of Craig Brewer's smaller projects.
That's right. That's right. The grant program has generated about $750 million in economic output for the state of Tennessee. The grant has also generated about $440 million in new incomes to Tennesseans specifically.
My.
Yeah, it's impacted roughly 10,000 businesses across the state of Tennessee.
All those vendors that were used.
Exactly. And that's really the great thing about production, because it really impacts a lot of small businesses. And then also the production days. I mean, that's 13,000 more production days that the grant program has put here that would not have been here if we did not have that program.
No, that's true, because all of those grants were very important, critical. I don't know that the projects in Memphis would have been made without them. How much money is in it now for next year? How much money is it?
So the current grant program is funded at $2 million recurring. Right now, I think in this current fiscal year, which is fiscal year 22, the one that we're in right now, we have about $100,000 left in
the program. It went fast, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and it's probably going to be depleted, here in the next 30 to 45 days. So we'll deplete the funds for this year long before we get the new tranche of money, which will be July 1st, 2022. And so right now in the budget, we have $2 million for next year, starting that July 1st date, which will then, of course, be there and will be the monies allocated for the whole year. What we've seen, again, with the grant program is just a lot of undulation in how it is funded. In fiscal year 18, we got about $12 million in what we call a cost increase to our fund. And so that was $12 million on top of the $2 million. In FY19, it dropped from $12 million to $3 million in cost increase. And then in 2020, in 2021, and then in 2022, we got zero cost increase. So what has happened, at least over the last 5 fiscal years, is just the cost increase to our grant program has ultimately declined. And then what's happened on the other side is that demand has risen. And so within those same fiscal years, we've lost about 33 projects here to the state of Tennessee, over those 3 fiscal years. It's about an investment of $95 million to the state that was unrealized, because we did not have the grants available. I think it was around 4,500 jobs, that were lost.
Gosh, it sounds like we need to do something to get the more money in the fund, in the grant fund.
Well, I think the grant fund is something that is very targeted again towards smaller independent productions.
Oh, there's a lot of independent film producers in Memphis.
There is, and I think that's why the grant program was so important to keep. Even though we had this new tax credit that we were bringing on, the importance of that grant was primary because it allowed access for our local content creators, as well as making us a more competitive place for independent productions coming in that might not necessarily want to go to Georgia to deal with the tax credit, or they have to compete with other shows, but to come here to the state. And the great thing about having the grant program, or a great thing about having independent film here, is that independent film helps hire more local people here.
Oh, absolutely. And also it's a lot of filmmakers stay in independent film and have are wonderful filmmakers. And then others make the transition to studio pictures. And it kind of is, but it's more than anything, it's, a passageway.
Yeah, no, it is, and that's the way that, looking at it, we look at it as a, place for people to come, get into the business, learn it, get trained, and then the tax credit being something that, would be more around anchor productions, allowing them to elevate into bigger productions that we get here. Mm-hmm. And I think that really gives us sort of the full cycle when we're dealing with a two-tiered system, which was our strategy for the last couple years, is to keep the grant program for our local and independent, and then build out this tax credit to really initiate more of these larger anchor productions here.
Mm-hmm. How does the new incentive work? I mean, how does it work? The grant fund was a refund of expenses in the state that were qualified, say what, 25%? And then how is this new and exotic, exotic to me, I don't really quite understand it. How does it work?
Yeah, so one of the objectives that we've been trying to meet over the last several years is trying to have continuity in our resources here, primarily for incentives, because we just not have had continuity in the grant program. The grant program is always funded at different levels over the years, which, you and I have worked with a lot of different projects, and, sometimes our ability to recruit is based on what kind of funding is involved in the grant program. So as we looked forward, one of the things we wanted to figure out is how do we generate really year-round full-time jobs, and how do we generate full-time investment into the state of Tennessee? And so that's what this new credit is targeted and aligned with, because it doesn't take any cash investment or from a budget to fund it. This is merely funded from tax returns. And the way that this primarily works is that it's a 40% tax credit against a franchise and excise tax that a company generates here in the state of Tennessee. So what a franchise excise tax is that a company has to pay a tax on their net wealth here, and then also on their jobs that they produce here. So there's a tax that the state levies. And so what this program does, for example, is that it allows a company like Comcast. So Comcast generates a very significant F&E tax liability here because of their net wealth here, and of course all the jobs that they create here. What this new credit allows us to do, or new law allows us to do, it allows us to go to NBC Universal, which is an affiliate now of Comcast, and it allows NBC Universal to conduct production activities here in the state of Tennessee because they are an affiliate of Comcast. And really that came about just through the shifting landscape of media over the last 5 years.
True.
We probably couldn't have done this, even 3 years ago, but because all of these conglomerates have now bought media companies, and there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions happening that are allowing these types of tax laws to be more effectively utilized. And that's what we're doing here in the state. We don't have a state income tax here. So we've always been, not as competitive, as Georgia or other places that have state income taxes. So what we've shifted to are the taxes that we do have, which are a franchise excise tax. And again, with these companies now merging with one another, companies like Comcast that own NBC, there's Amazon, which owns Amazon Studios. You have CBS Viacom, which is now Paramount. They have companies here in the state of Tennessee, along with Apple and Apple Studios, Discovery and Warner Media. Once Discovery buys Warner Media, that's going to be a whole other, group of studios and business that we'll be able to go after. So really, this is just a tool to help expand our ability to go and attract, larger productions to the state of Tennessee.
And the parent company that will receive this tax credit from the production, does it have to have a certain amount of tax liability to qualify, or does it have to be a media conglomerate? For instance, could a statewide bank partner up with a production and receive the tax credit?
Well, I think that really depends. What it depends on is really what kind of productions that they're wanting to do here in the state of Tennessee. Obviously you're going to want to generate enough liability to then offset the amount of credit. So, if you're a Comcast, you're generating tens of millions of dollars in an F&E tax liability here. So that means you can do bigger productions. You can do $10 million, $20 million productions here in the state of Tennessee, and then you have the liability to offset the credit against. I mean, if you're generating $500,000 worth of F&E, it's all in context to what kind of production that you're wanting to do, because you're wanting to make sure that you have enough liability to offset the amount of credit that you're generating. But there really is no set threshold around, how much liability you're generating. It's just really about how much, credit that you can offset against the liability to make it worth your while in doing a production here.
Mm-hmm. So Bob, it really doesn't have to be a media conglomerate to take advantage of this tax credit. It could be, hey, some company like FedEx, for instance, in Memphis. We're so proud of FedEx. And they could enter into an agreement with a production and then take advantage of the tax credit?
Well, I think what you have to look at is sort of the train. There is nothing in the law that specifies that it has to be a Comcast owning an NBC Universal. It's just really about the end taxpayer. You could, for example, have a FedEx, and a FedEx, of course, could generate a very large F&E, but probably for FedEx, for it to be beneficial to a FedEx, they would have to have some investment into a production, right? So there'd have to be some sort of financial liability there between them to be able to work on that. There are a lot of different scenarios underneath this program that can work. I mean, it really is a unique structure. And again, it's not.
Sounds exciting.
We think that over the long term, what it does, it helps activate, these larger companies to come in here and build anchor productions. And anchor productions are what sort of in the long run, will create infrastructure, and it will create.
You mean like series, TV series?
It could be series, it could be larger slated production, but those are the types of things that really develop the economic clustering that we see that benefits, production in the long run, or any sort of content creation really in the long run. And that's sort of the way that we look at this. This is a very long-term game that we're playing here. But we feel that, that it will pay off as companies maybe move here and they might expand their actual media footprints here as well over the long term to utilize this type of credit.
Gosh, it sounds like this new incentive is going to offer some huge opportunities. And like you said, it won't be depending on how much money the legislature has passed to be in the fund, because this is something that will be ongoing, couldn't be ongoing because of the tax credit. Bob, what kind of productions would qualify?
So the type of productions that will qualify for the new tax credit will be scripted and non-scripted films and TV series.
You mean reality will be
Yeah,
incentivized?
reality is a part of that, and
Great.
then there's also scoring, music scoring will
Oh
fall
boy,
under
the
that.
Memphis recording studios will like that.
Video gaming is something that we also have in this new program, because video gaming is, such obviously it's a huge growth industry, and we want to be able to enable that growth here in the state, as well as animation. And so animation is now a part of that.
This is new, isn't it?
It's new, and then also post-production, audio post-production and visual. So, post-production being done here, so you don't necessarily have to film here in the state of Tennessee, but you can now qualify to get post-production.
So it could
here
be a
in the state.
standalone post-production.
It can be a standalone post-production.
My, that's wonderful.
And the way that the program is just framed out is that it's 40% on all resident and non-resident labor that is here for qualified production here in the state of Tennessee. There is a 10% uplift on that 40% for counties that are Tier 2, Tier 3, and Tier 4.
And Memphis is Tier 2?
Memphis is a Tier 2. So, if a production, was based out of Memphis, the crew or any of the labor that they are, hiring from Shelby County will get the 10% uplift on the 40%. So it's it's competitive, on the labor side, with the non-resident and resident, which we hadn't really had that mechanism before, which gives us a little more competitive, against Georgia. And the other part of the program is that there's a 15-year carry forward on the tax credits.
What does that mean?
So what that means is that a production can come in and they can generate, let's say they generate $10 million worth of credits on something. It allows the company to then offset that liability over 15 years. So it gives them a sort of a greater runway to offset those credits. So that way they don't have to feel, or they're not in a position where they have to take the credits in 1 year. They can offset it, which again gives the production
this
a
sounds
little more
great. It really does
flexibility.
sound great.
The only, the one sort of, restrictiveness, and this is sort of the big, sort of thing, or the restrictiveness around this program is that it, you have to have an F&E tax liability, and it's non-transferable, non-refundable. And so that's really sort of one of the,
The credit is non-transferable.
Yeah, the credit is non-refundable, non-transferable. So that's why you have to set these things up in a way that, that you have to be an affiliate of the taxpayer. You can also be a third party. So a third party can actually generate a credit, and then they can offset it or transfer it to the taxpayer. How
does that work? I don't understand that, the third party.
So for example, Discovery here. Discovery does not do their own production. They hire a third party production services company to do everything. So what this tax credit allows, it allows a third party vendor to then do all the payroll, make all the hiring, make all the non-payroll expenses, and then generate the credit. And then they're able to transfer it to a Discovery through basically a production services agreement. And then Discovery can then take the credit. And so what that does is that sort of builds more companies around these bigger engines like a Discovery, and soon to be Warner Media once Discovery merges, or once Discovery finishes their buyout of Warner Media. Will allow more third-party production service companies, we believe, to start growing here. And again, that enhances our structure, our infrastructure.
The cottage industry.
Yeah, and it enhances, enhances our economic cluster here.
Gosh, that does sound great. Are there any restrictions? I mean, back in the 90s, we'd have huge stars in Memphis that made big salaries. And I know in some states, as a matter of fact, I think in most states that have incentives, there's a cap on on the stars' salaries or the director's salary. Is there any kind of restriction like that on this?
Yes, yeah, we have it's $1 million cap on all resident and non-residents, and that's, per individual, and that's per production, per episode. So we will grant the credit up to their first $1 million in payroll.
But that's per episode, so that's really not that restrictive.
No, I mean, the 1 million mark, of course, is the benchmark, but we moved it to per production per episode just because now, with companies like Apple, right, studios creating these very large budgeted features or large TV series, somebody can reach that 1 million benchmark in one episode. So again, I think this is about giving us more competitive edge. Or at least the opportunity to go and talk with productions about coming here
Yes.
to the state of Tennessee, and it's really staying in that conversation.
Yes, yes, and I hope I have the opportunity to go with you again on some appointments now that we have such great ammunition in our belt, so to speak.
Absolutely.
One last question. In Memphis, there's been a lot of interest and actually, looks like some concrete plans to build sound stages. I've always had the clients tell me that even though there is a big need for soundstage space in the world because of all the new streaming channels and the backlog because of COVID, always had the clients tell me that it wasn't that great an idea to build a soundstage in a state that didn't have a competitive incentive, but now we have one.
Yes, I mean, the new tax credit, is a additional resource for us. It does make us, at least we believe, more competitive to bring more production here. And you're right, whenever you're talking with studios or, you're talking with companies that want to make that type of investment in the state, they do want to see some sort of continuity around, incentives. I would say, again, this gives us, a conversation piece to go and talk about what we have here. Obviously, the more infrastructure we build here in the state of Tennessee, the less really dependency that we have to have on incentives, meaning that if you're able to have studios in Memphis and you're able to have a studio in Nashville or in Knoxville, then it still becomes less expensive, for them to come to, the state, and less expensive to do production here. And they can have an incentive, and the incentive might not offset what Georgia or Louisiana or one of the bigger states might get, but because there is an incentive and because there is infrastructure, it still has the ability of being competitive and lowering costs for these productions. Meaning that we don't have to necessarily go to the level of a Georgia or Louisiana if we build out an infrastructure here in the state of Tennessee. And I think having an incentive like this or a tax credit like this, which has no sunset, by the way, on it, meaning that, it doesn't go dark at any time. And I think, again, it's the continuity that allows business and business activities to feel secure when investing money here in the state of Tennessee.
This has been so exciting and so interesting, and I know everybody shares my joy in hearing such positive news, and you are to be congratulated, Commissioner Rolfe, the governor, everyone, Revenue Commissioner, everybody should be congratulated because we've needed something like this in Tennessee for a long time, and we just can't wait for everything to start happening again. Thank you so much, Bob.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me here to have this discussion. And of course, we've had a very long-standing partnership with one another, and honestly, without your partnership, without the city's partnership, without the county's partnership, we really could not do the things that we have done and accomplish the things that we have accomplished over the many, many years together. And the truth is that Memphis just has so much talent in it, has so much soul in it, and it's just one of those places that I think filmmakers are drawn to and will continue to be drawn to, you know, no matter what incentives have to do with it. I think that, you know, Memphis is just the heart of creativity for our state here. And so, again, that is because
thank
of
you. Thank
and that is
you.
because of the great people of Memphis and, of course, Shelby County.
Yes, well, thank you, and we're proud to bring this to you all, so you can watch it all you want, and the next thing you know, you'll be watching a camera set up on South Main. Thanks for being with us, and Bob, thanks again.
Thank you.